welcome to everything you need to know before you embark on a Monarch migration. We have a wonderful panel for you today, and first I'd like to introduce you to Corbin Hawkins, who is our Field Operations Manager. Take it away, Corbin.
Hey, thanks, Kendall. I'm happy to be here. I should probably preface with the fact that I'm really excited about this webinar, because if I were to choose one trip myself to be sent on for NatHab, it would be the Monarch trip. So I'm really excited to go through this information with you guys and speak with our two guides, Court and Astrid, today about this trip that is so very special. But first, I'd like to introduce Renata Haas. She is our field staff director, and she is kind of the owner of all things COVID protocol, which we're going to touch on here in just a minute. But Renata, if you don't mind, just a moment here, introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Corbin. I have been working with Natural Habitat Adventures for, I believe, going on 8 years now, and oversee all of our expedition leaders worldwide and all of our field staff worldwide. But I also do quite a bit with risk management. And since COVID started, I have been the lead on the COVID protocols team, so worked to develop our protocols and then implement them all over the world where we have been
Awesome, thank you. And moving forward, Astrid, why don't you give us a little bit of background on your involvement with NatHab and what you do?
Well, hello everybody, thanks for joining us. I've been working for NatHab since, it's probably too long to say, but since 1998. And with our first trip that was the Monarchs, still is the Monarchs. So I'm a biologist and I live in Puerto Vallarta on the Pacific side of Mexico. I work more with whales, but Monarchs have a very special place in my heart. So it's very excited to go again and see them one more time. You never get tired of it.
Thanks, Astrid. And I'll finish here with you, Court. Give us a little bit of background about yourself and your involvement with NatHab and all the things.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, guys. Yeah, of course, this is one of my favorite trips. I've been with NatHab about 8 years, but been guiding in the ecotourism conservation travel space for about, believe it or not, 20 years. And Monarchs is what kind of got me started. It's the most amazing experience. I loved it so much, I ended up going to grad school for it and did a dissertation on monarch research and all that sort of stuff. So, while I guide worldwide for us, this is certainly one of the trips I look forward to most, one of the trips I'm most involved in. And it's a pleasure to be here today to get you guys excited about this adventure and fill you in on some of the nitty gritty of what to expect and what to be excited about.
Yeah, thanks, Court. And specifically to you, this is the first time we've been able to work with each other in quite some time now, since the pandemic really started. So happy to be on screen with you again. And let's kick things off. So before we get into butterflies and all things Monarchs, I do want to spend a few moments here with you, Renata, on the COVID protocol, specifically how it came to be, what it is, and then let's kind of move into what that means in the context of Mexico and the Monarch trip.
Yeah, so developing protocols surrounding COVID to reduce the risk for everyone that goes on our trips, for the expedition leaders, operations staff, and the communities that we visit during our trips is quite a bit of work. So I wanted to go into the background on how we go about designing these protocols, just to give everyone some insight to that. So we've been, we first and foremost needed to put a team together to determine how we were going to develop these protocols. So we diligently named ourselves the COVID Task Force, which is comprised of a few individuals at NatHab. We meet at least once a week, and when we started creating this protocols, met more frequently than that. But we determined that there was a pretty substantial process that we needed to go through in order to create these protocols. So first and foremost, we did a bit of research and looked at all of the recommendations from the CDC and the World Health Organization to develop the skeleton of those protocols. Our next step was to collaborate with as many entities as we could. So we reached out to the other experts within the adventure and outdoor travel industry to share best practices, as we wanted to look at every different component that we would have to mitigate or use to mitigate the spread of COVID. So collaboration was incredibly important. The next is figuring out how we were going to work with our partners in the field. So after collaborating with industry professionals, we then had to determine and create a vetting system. So this is ensuring that we have a process for vetting, the individuals that drive our vehicles, the restaurants, the hotels, the activities. So they all have to abide by a standard that we set, and they have to note that they are following that standard. And if they are not, then we unfortunately either have to have a conversation with them to see what they need to be able to abide by the standards that we have set, or we're not able to work with them until they can meet those. So that was a really integral part of this process. Next, we needed to develop some screening protocols, and that is a process where we are screening our expedition leaders and guests to make sure that we can, again, mitigate that risk. So that includes having guests and our expedition leaders fill out a health questionnaire prior to going on the trip, having daily health and temperature checks to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to catch, if someone does have it, the spread as much as possible. So along with that type of screening, we also work really closely with United Healthcare Global to develop a protocol that if, let's say, a guest is showing symptoms, we have a team of doctors that will conduct a virtual health assessment to evaluate the symptoms and provide the next step for our guests. Because as we know, COVID symptoms are like a lot of other symptoms. And for example, because of some of the areas that we go, if it's higher altitude or if it's colder, you might develop the sniffles. And we want to make sure that we are able to differentiate between what is a COVID symptom and what is a symptom of the environment. So that's where that team of doctors with United Healthcare Global really comes into play when we are on our trips. The next after screening is training. We need to make sure we train our expedition leaders, our operations staff that are on the ground with guests. So we do in-depth trainings with every team of guides and operations staff before the season starts to make sure that they are up to snuff in our protocols. And then finally is expectations. We want to make sure that the expectations are set for everyone that we're working with. It's why we why we're screening our partners, and it is why we are having this webinar right now, to make sure expectations are set for how we will be mitigating the risk of getting COVID on a trip. And ensuring that guests and our guides know how they can also help facilitate in mitigating that risk. So one of the things that we're doing for that is really helping you do that before you even leave the house. So within the PDE packet is also KN95 masks, hand sanitizer, buff face coverings, and information on how you can help mitigate your risk as soon as you leave the house. We really want to make sure we set those expectations. So that's the last step, is how we sort of develop these, all of these protocols.
Yeah, and props to you and the task force, because this document is massive. It's some 20-something pages long, and it took months to develop. So thank you for all the hard work. Let's pare it down though, and take a look at what that means for people who are traveling on our trips. I believe you call it the combination intervention approach. It's a 4-pillar approach, and I will just kind of have you walk through what that means for people that are traveling with us, and what those specific steps we're going to take in the field would look like.
Absolutely. So we've been running trips since July in the national parks, Africa, and Costa Rica, and have not had any instances of COVID contraction with any of our expedition leaders, operations staff, or guests. And that's because we're taking this combination intervention approach, which substantially decreases the risk of transmission. These controls can provide an additional degree of protection, even if one of the intervention is not available. So the first one, as you can see on the screen, is respiratory hygiene. We are all familiar with this at this point. That is wearing a face covering and covering your mouth when you are coughing and sneezing. In Mexico specifically, like in many other countries, one of the mandates that they have put is that everyone does have to wear a mask when they are in public spaces, and that does include outside. And we are very happy that they are taking the extra measures to reduce that risk. Now, it is the case that we've sent you KN95 masks, we've sent you buffs, but if for some reason you need another one during your trip, we do have extra masks available for you.
Okay.
And next is hand hygiene. So making sure, we heard about this a lot at the start of the pandemic, but making sure we are washing and sanitizing our hands frequently. So you all will have hand sanitizer with you when you're traveling. It'll be readily available throughout and easily accessible throughout the trip. And then we also are making sure that we have additional stops and really pointing out when you have the ability to wash your hands. And the guides will be making extra notes of, hey, before we're eating a meal, we're gonna sanitize our hands. So we're just really making sure that we're putting that into general daily communication with everyone that's on our program. And next one is physical distancing, another thing that we've been really used to for many, many months. And this is keeping within or outside of 6 feet with anyone outside of your traveling party, which we've all been doing and very aware of. How you might see this fit in a little bit differently when you're on a group trip is during meals. We do make sure that because you aren't wearing a mask when you're consuming food, is that our tables are socially distanced. We also do our best to keep meals outside whenever possible, private room if an outside dining is not available, and then ensuring that if we are in a restaurant that we are meeting the requirements, or the restaurant's meeting the requirements of the government, which right now for Mexico is between 20 and 50% capacity, depending on where, what city we're in.
All right.
And then finally is enhanced sanitation. So we want to make sure that we are consistently cleaning and sanitizing high touch surfaces. And we have gone so far as to hire a specific operations staff that is in charge of ensuring that we are keeping with these COVID protocols, and they're also in charge of sanitizing high touch surfaces, contacting the restaurants, hotels, and whatnot before to make sure that they are abiding by those protocols. So you will have one individual specifically on your trip designated to this task.
Yeah, and I've specifically been that person, and it's a thorough role. I mean, we're talking sanitizing the vans every night. Seat belts, handles, anything that, you know, everybody entering and exiting vehicles is going to touch, door handles, all that sort of stuff. So we do take this stuff very seriously, just to note there. But in Mexico specifically, so this is kind of our overarching policy on COVID. But Mexico specifically has some differences, and one of which is this this health questionnaire, but there sounds like there's a few more, Renata. What else is going to happen for folks that are traveling down to Mexico, to and from, actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So every country has different entry and exit requirements. There are a lot that require you to fill out a health questionnaire before you travel. Mexico is going to have a lot of health questionnaires that you are filling out, just saying that, making sure you don't have any symptoms during the course of the trip. All of this is outlined in your PDB, including the link to this. If you have any questions, just give a ring to your adventure specialist and they will let you know that link. But essentially, fill it out before you depart your home. You can do it on your phone when you're en route, but we just suggest filling it out at your home. You'll be given a QR code, and you'll present that QR code to immigration once you enter Mexico. Next is that you, to come back to the US, it's required that everyone has a negative antigen test, negative result with an antigen test before returning to the US. So we have organized all of that for everyone. It'll be on the morning of day 5. We will be tested at the hotel, so you don't have to leave. Results will be within 24 hours, and it is an FDA approved test and incredibly accurate. So we wanted to make that as simple as possible so that it can be one and done, and then you can head back to the US. The other thing that I wanted to note is we have gotten a few questions about if it was the case that you needed to quarantine during the trip, and I wanted to note that if that is the case, we do have specific representatives, not just in Mexico, that will be your point person, but also specific representative at NatHab that you will be in contact with throughout the whole process. And normally the case is that you would quarantine within the hotel. So we want to make sure that you're as comfortable as possible during that process and have someone to contact if anything comes up. But that is the extent of what you need to do for Mexico specifically, and we are incredibly excited to be able to get everyone out to go see the Monarchs.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that, Renata. And if you've got nothing else COVID related for us, let's get into the trip. What I like to do with these webinars, especially in locations like Mexico or the Monarch trip where I haven't been, is try to answer or kind of guess essentially the questions that travelers are going to have. So I'm going to approach this as if I'm a traveler on this trip and I want to know a little bit more about what to expect on the trip. But first and foremost, let's just get a sense of the place. And I think, Astrid, you're the perfect person to address this. In talking and creating this webinar, you mentioned the word spirituality a lot, and you talked about just the importance of this trip on a little bit of a deeper level. So in your own words, how does that look to you? Give me a little insight to your life and what it's like living in such a beautiful region and being able to take people on these trips.
Well, first, the whole area is very special. We're going to Mexico Highlands, and it's quite remote in a sense, and also it's a place that has stayed pretty much the same in the last 20 years, so that makes it like unique. And even they do receive tourism for the butterflies. That's it. The rest of the year, there's nobody. So it's a very pristine place where the locals are very friendly. They're always trying to talk with you, even if they don't speak English. So it gets to be very funny. And then you have this gorgeous forest just filling with the magical butterflies. And just to be surrounded in this forest with the fir and pine trees all over you, with beautiful sceneries, with literally an ocean of mountains surrounding you. It's very special. It's a very peaceful trip. It's a place where you just can go inside the forest and find your little corner by your own and just sit in awe and observe the butterflies and even hear them. So it's very special, very different from other nature wildlife viewing trip.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And every person I've talked to that's been on this trip has the same sentiment. And Court, you've been doing this how many years? I think you've guided this trip for approaching 2 decades now. Is that the same feeling for you?
Close to it. Yeah, I mean, it's you hear a track record like that and you know it's kind of a big deal for me. But you know, I love this photo here because there is some sort of palpable kind of fanaticism around monarchs. But I will still say, even if you are not a butterfly lover, even if you're just a general naturalist like a lot of our travelers are, this is going to be, I have no doubt, one of the highlights of your nature travel career. I routinely have people that were just with me the previous year down trekking gorillas in Rwanda or Uganda, in Borneo, or they just got back from Antarctica, you know, these big monumental things. They saw the Northern Lights, and they'll be sitting in these monarch sanctuaries. And I know we're going to see a lot of photos here coming up, and they'll be watching this, you know, just the whole story to unfold, the butterflies to wake up for the day. And they'll say, Court, this thing that we're witnessing right now, this phenomenon is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. The most, like, on top of all those other superlatives. And that's kind of the best way I can sort of organize my thoughts and show how important, how amazing, how phenomenal this phenomenon really is that it's oftentimes or the highlight of someone's nature travel career, even if they've done all the greats before. And I know it will be for you too.
Well, I'm excited. So I'm going to take a moment to put myself in a traveler's shoes. I'm getting ready to go on this trip, and I've got a few questions for you. First and foremost is what do I bring? You know, I hear that the weather can be somewhat variable. Do I need a jacket? Do I need flip-flops? Kind of describe to me what I'm expecting weather-wise and kind of the packing list.
Sure, I can jump in and take that one. And Astrid, of course, anything that you have to add, please do so. Yeah, this picture says it pretty well. You see people in short sleeve t-shirts, you know, jackets, hats. It's kind of a little bit of everything. The best way to put it is that expect temperatures in the morning to be pretty cool. You know, people are thinking, oh, we're heading south. We're going close to the tropics. We're going to Mexico. You know, beaches and sun and sand. It's not. It's like 10,000 feet elevation, and when you wake up in the morning, it's pretty close to freezing. It's, you know, 32 Fahrenheit. It might be in the high 30s or low 40s, but nevertheless, it's something where you want a jacket. But the temperature has the possibility to warm so much throughout the day. And every day is a little bit different with cloud cover and little tiny differences in weather patterns, but it's very common for it to warm into the 40s, into the 50s, even into the high 60s throughout the day. And if you've ever been in the mountains and had the sun, a blue sky day, it feels like the sun's right here. So it can get really warm really quickly, even though you might be starting off with, you know, a buff or with a wool hat over your head or with gloves even. So as a result, you have to be really prepared for just about anything out there. Not winter parkas, of course, but good layers that you can peel off and put in a backpack as the day warms, and you might have, you know, sun and clouds and sun and clouds in the mountains.
Great. And Astrid, just before this, you mentioned, I think you said it was 23 degrees Celsius down there today.
Yes, but this is in the coast of Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, so it's more cooler at Angangeo. And for what Kurt says, I will add that just to keep in mind that the places where you're staying in Angangeo, the hotels are really, they don't have central heating. So sometimes being inside is a little bit cooler than outside. So also bring some layers for going to bed. It's better not to use them than to be missing them. So always bring your layers, and if you bring them and don't use them, it's good, but then you can be miserable if you leave all those layers behind at home.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This next photo here, I'll just take a moment to point out just the gear in this photo. I mean, you see a knee brace and walking sticks, camera gear, all that sort of stuff. So if there's anything specific that you require kind of in the realm of gear, that's important to bring it, because you will be on your feet quite a bit on this trip, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I might just jump in there real quickly and talk about footwear. I don't know if we're going to get to that next, but that's always a really common, really good question, is what kind of footwear, what sort of boots. It's not a ton of hiking, but it can be a little bit varied terrain. It's on the soil, it's on the concrete, it's a mixture of both. There could be some roots, there could be some little rocks. Not the place for sandals, but nor do you need like really serious high top boots. A lot of our travelers do choose to bring them. They might have weaker ankles, or they just might feel more comfortable in higher top boots. They might run cold and they say, well, I'm doing it for the warmth. And that's all well and good. It's totally fine. You can bring high top boots, but you can also get away with just a good athletic sneaker. You could get away with like a trail runner or a cross trainer I don't even know what that means, but you know, like all the different types of athletic shoes is just fine. It's usually pretty dry here. In my many years, I can count the number of times on one hand that have had any sort of precipitation, you know, whether it's a little bit of rain or even a little bit of snow at this altitude. So people will say, well, do I need Gore-Tex or waterproof boots? You know, most of my boots are already Gore-Tex, but I'm not choosing those specifically for this trip because I need to be wading through, rivers and creeks and everything. It's pretty dry. It's more dry and dusty than it is in any sort of wet sort of environment.
Okay. So we've got the shoes and the layers, the gear, all the stuff that we'll need for the trip. In my experience in the places in Mexico I've been, in regards to money, I've been able to just use American currency. Is that going to be the same on this trip, or should I prepare my money a little bit ahead of time?
You should prepare your money ahead of time. You will need pesos. Remember, we're going to these remote places. And just to give you an idea, in the town of Angangueo, the closest bank is 1 hour away driving. So if you bring US dollars, people don't know what to do with them. It's like having no currency. So basically, it's better to change your money either at the airport in the States or when arriving at the airport in Mexico City. And also a good piece of advice is not to have big bills of 500 pesos, because that's almost like having no money. It's very difficult to get change. So 200, 100 pesos is perfect. But the only place where you will be able to use credit cards is going to be Mexico City or in some places in Valle de Bravo and Avándaro. But the rest is only cash and only pesos. So definitely get ready for that.
Yeah, it's a definite cash economy up in these beautiful countrysides. I will also say people often ask how much money to change, and I say, there's amazing amount of souvenirs up in this area. You wouldn't think so, but people are often pleasantly surprised with the art, the weavings, the general souvenirs, and people are like, oh gosh, I would have changed more money. And the Bank of Court and Astrid may be open on the day you need more money, but so in other words, my humble advice is change more than you think. Change more than you think. It's very easy to change it back in US dollars when you're back at the airport going home at the end of the trip. You lose a little bit of money on the currency conversion, but you're probably talking about like $5 total on the loss of changing it and then having to change back. But again, more often than not, people find there's way more cool stuff to get and to bring home for friends and family or yourself than they would have thought, and they usually are happy to change more.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm prepared, I'm ready to go. I've got my money in order, I've exchanged it, I've just landed in Mexico City. I don't have a visual aid here to go along with it, but walk me through what to expect on that arrival day when I've just entered a new country and I don't know where to go.
I'll jump in real quick. Astrid, you can jump in. I'll say it's hilariously chaotic in the Mexico City airport when you exit immigration and customs. I mean, not like bad, but it's just a typical kind of bustling little area. Nowadays, though, travel is so reduced, I bet you there's not a lot going on. And this is where I know Astrid will be able to weigh in more. But there will be a smiling face, one of us waiting for you right there in the airport as you exit the customs and immigration area. We'll have a sign, we'll have some sort of NatHab logo, you'll see jackets like this, and we will be there. And I would imagine in this era, there will be some other people waiting for arrivals. But yeah, what's the latest on that, Astrid?
Well, it's pretty simple. Well, the first, as you mentioned, is that there's less people traveling right now. So that's one of the good sides of all this, that the airport is going to be more easygoing and more relaxed. And the other thing is there's going to be somebody waiting for you with the sign, with NatHab sign, with your name on it. But also look at your pre-departure briefing. And in case you don't know where to go, it says depending on which terminal you fly in, there's a specific point, a gathering point. So just check it out if in case you have any worries about it, but it's smoother than you think. And we're always ready to look out for you. So just stand still wherever you have to be. Don't go outside of the airport, and we will find you and take you to the hotel. So it's really smooth and easy. Nothing to worry. And as Court said, just look for the NatHab logo, and we'll be there to pick you up.
Okay, so we've landed, and when I travel, especially on these trips where you're not exactly just staying put in the arrival city, I kind of want to know how we're getting around. And it sounds like on these trips, there's kind of 3 different methods of transportation that we utilize. I don't want to spend too much time here because I think everyone kind of gets a general sense of how these things work. I just want to address the types of vehicles and specifically in relation to COVID, the standards that we are imparting on these vehicles. So here we've got just your standard Sprinter van. Court, it sounds like about half capacity or so. Is that what we're shooting for in vehicles like this?
Yeah, no more than 50% capacity, normal capacity, which, as you know, from a NatHab trip is already pretty low. So yeah, that distancing is still a big part of it.
And we maintain our window seats for everybody, whether it's on a van or a charter bus like we see here. But the big one on this trip, and it really sounds like it can be a highlight of the trip actually, is driving around in the trucks. Tell me a little bit about this experience. And again, touch on the COVID part for me as well.
Yeah, I love this. So this is usually just kind of like a fun surprise of how we get actually up the hill to the Monarch sanctuaries or the trailhead. After we have our first lunch in a beautiful little restaurant there in Angangeo, we drive a short distance, drop our bags off at the hotel, get anything you need out of your bags before we go to the Monarchs for the first day. And then we have these open back pickup trucks that it's just so authentic. It's the way it should be. This is how so it's not a long ride. We're probably talking about 20, 25 minutes. It's open air. You'll have your jackets on already, but by this time of the day, especially the first day, it's sort of that mid-afternoon, so the temperatures will likely have warmed. We're kind of rumbling up this cobblestone hill. The reason we're in these is that the cobblestone is quite windy, and it is very scenic, but it's a little bit too windy for one of the larger vehicles to get through. So we take these open back pickup trucks, we get up there, and then 20, 25 minutes later, we're at the base of the Monarch reserves. We check in, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I love these. It's a very authentic experience. You kind of go through a couple of little neighborhoods. It's a great way to see things. We'll start to see on a warm day, we'll start to see maybe a couple butterflies flittering around the actual cobblestone driveway, so to speak. So yeah, this is, we don't spend a ton of time in these, but every time we do go to the colonies, or in Rosario, that is, we do take this open back pickup truck up and down.
And I think it's important to note, we obviously haven't run these trips during the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you're seeing all of these photos, of course, people don't have masks on, but you can expect that yourself and everyone around you will have a mask at all times. These benches will have, or these trucks will have 6 people, but you can see that they are open air, so you will have constant airflow as you move about. Court, just a second ago, you mentioned that something about hotels here. So my next big talking point, and what I kind of want to know when I'm approaching a new destination, is where are we staying? What do the hotels look like? The accommodations are safe, secure, etc. Tell me a little bit about these properties in particular, and maybe just a general overview of the types of places we stay on a Monarch trip.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll let Astrid talk about the hotels in Angangeo and in Avondero, but I'll start off quickly by saying there is a bit of a superlative here. Is the arrival and departure hotel, which is in Mexico City, happens to be my #1, my favorite capital city hotel in the world. Don't go in with grand expectations, but it's this really cool hotel that has received architectural and design awards. It's basically like a modern artistic interpretation of an old Mayan pyramid. So there's like these interesting sort of corridors with, this is actually not it, but we'll get to this in Angangeo. But in Mexico City, it's a really cool place. There's like a little restaurant that floats over this pool, and I don't know, it's a cool place. So I will say I don't normally gush about, capital city hotels. It's just like a means to an end, but it's a pretty cool one. And then I'll hand it over to Astrid to talk about our hotels the rest of the trip.
Well, so the slides we're seeing on the previous one are the hotels we use in Angangeo, and we're going to stay there for 2 nights. And they're very lovely hotels. They're both run by families, so they have this beautiful family sense. And but they're quite rustic, of course, with all the services, your private bathroom, and we're going to provide with all sorts of little details to make your stay more comfortable and cozy, even in this cold weather at night. But of course, they are rustic and very limited but comfortable. So you'll have all you need, but just that is a little bit rustic because that's what we have in town. And I think it's really nice to stay in the town, and it's also very practical because we're closer to the butterflies. So you have to leave a little bit of comfort behind just to be closer and have the butterflies nearby you, but also to enjoy the local communities and learn about the local way of lifestyle, which I think adds to the trip too.
One of my favorite things about Mexico is the color. So just scrolling through these, you'll see this everywhere, correct? I mean, everything is this bright, beautiful paint. I love that. I love that look. Yeah,
we're not scared of color, so you'll see all this mixture of colors everywhere. So it's beautiful. This last place is Avándaro, the last place where we're staying, which also makes it very nice. It's more a spa facility, a resort. So we get kind of like an upgrade in our stay, and it's also lower level, so in altitude. So it's a little bit of a break for the body after being at high altitude and colder place to get to this beautiful place where we get a little bit more pampered, surrounded by mountains and by forest. So it's a beautiful place to kind of like finish before going back to Mexico City. So we have all sort of these arrangements from the city hotel to the rustic facilities in Angangueo, and then to this beautiful spa in the middle when we are traveling back to Mexico City.
And what about dining? I know that Renata spoke a little bit to it in regards to COVID and trying to eat outside and distancing ourselves. But what does that really look like, I guess, is my question. And just quickly here, Court, I know that you particularly love the food, but I just kind of want to run through this and get your sense of the setting, more so maybe than the food itself.
Well, I'll quickly just say that there are a few things I really look forward to on this trip. It's seeing the butterflies, showing the butterflies to you guys, of course, seeing Astrid and my other expedition leaders, but the food is amazing. It's not like your Tex-Mex kind of stuff you'd be thinking. It's some of the best, freshest, most varied, amazing food on the planet. It's all Mexican, but it's phenomenal. But I know we don't need to talk about that extensively. So Astrid, I'll let you talk about sort of some of the settings that we'll be at.
Well, again, they all vary. Whenever possible, we're going to eat outside. Like this is one of the places we eat outside, sort of at the end of closer to the end of the trip. And we're not able to eat outside. We will have a lot of room for social distancing and different tables if needed. So nothing to worry about the setting. Of course, all the hotels and restaurants in Mexico, remember that Mexico is a tourist place. So we receive lots of tourists. So we're very well prepared all over the country to receive tourists in terms of all these COVID protocols. All the country has worked on that. So, and just add a little bit of friendliness to that, and it will be a perfect setting. So we can use, we normally just see one table here because that's the way we do it, but this time we were going to use separate tables and keep family units together and just everybody a little bit more spread out to make it comfortable and safe for good times.
Yeah, I have this picture included here. Again, it'll be a little bit different on this trip, but just to note that we are eating outside. You'll of course be a little bit more separated. And as with any NatHab trip, if you have any dietary restrictions, let us know that sort of stuff before time, and we can make that happen. Really almost anywhere in the world. I want to keep going though. I want to move past food. I know we just kind of briefly touched on that, but I want to start talking about butterflies, and I want to see what a day of butterfly watching looks like. How do we access these places? Are we on our feet all day? Walk me through a general butterfly day.
Sure, I'll jump in there. Well, I think one of the brilliant things about this itinerary is that we do see the butterflies 3 different days in 3 different times of day. So it gives us a variety of activities that the butterflies are engaging in. They do differ between morning, afternoon, late afternoon in terms of their activity level, where they're at, what they're doing, activities, behaviors. But generally, there's a bit of hiking and there's a bit of horseback riding. I think we'll get into the horseback riding after this, so I'll just kind of give a cursory overview, and then we can get into more specifics. But basically, each of these colonies is about a 45-minute horseback ride to a staging area, where then you walk about 15 to 20 minutes to the monarch sanctuaries. And once you're there, once you get to the sanctuaries, really once you're in the forest, once we get out of that little open back pickup truck, once we're out of the vehicle, we are in nature. We're in a beautiful Mexican fir and pine forest. It's just spectacular. Oftentimes on warm days, we'll start to see a couple little butterflies, monarchs that is, of course, flying around. But once we're there, we're immersed in nature, and even the horseback ride is beautiful and natural. But then once we get to the colonies, it's a nice sort of spread out area. The butterflies could be puddling at little water puddles. They could be flying in the air. They could be swaying in the breeze, and we can just sit and enjoy, photograph, of course, if you are a photographer. There are usually butterflies on the bushes, on some of the flowers. There are some cool birds flying around. So it's just this time that we get to really sit in the quietness of the forest and enjoy this incredible spectacle. And like I said, that moment that I get to round the corner, and I know the colony is coming up, and I watch people's faces as they see the colony for the first time and say, that's it, holy cow. And it's usually it happens with a tear running down their cheek, because it is a very, very magical moment.
And specifically the walking, is it pretty flat? It's varied terrain. What can I expect to be walking over? And should I bring my walking stick? Are we going to provide those?
Yeah, it can be quite varied. I know in our preparatory materials, in our sort of setting expectations, the physicality of the trip, we do kind of give what could be, but there is of course an average, so it could be a longer hike. It could be a little up and down. It could be walking across some rocks. Maybe one of them's a little unstable and you need to hold out for a hand of someone, grabbing one of the walking sticks we provide. Usually it's not too crazy. Usually it's about 15 to 20 minutes, and it is either up or down, a little bit of flat in between. But it could be more, it could be less. I've seen times when the monarchs are literally 5 minutes from the parking lot. They're just they've descended that much down the mountain because of daytime temperatures and heat, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's usually a walk kind of like this. If you see this picture here, there's a trail sort of going through these trees. It's a little bit of a worn trail, so you know where it is. It's a little bit uneven. There could be some sticks and some stones, some up and some down. But then of course it could be a little bit more graded than just this. I've usually at some point we're huffing and puffing to get up a little small hill before we reach the very end. Would you say that's about all accurate, Astrid?
Yeah, I will just add that the difficulty is really the altitude. So for folks like me that don't live in Boulder, Colorado, where you're used to the altitude and going hiking up the mountains at higher altitude, so all people coming from sea level, it's a little bit hard just because of the altitude. So it's kind of like your breath is shortened, but it's very easy because you will have a local guide, plus usually the guides from natural habitat. So the group can spread out. So there's never a hurry. So there's no need to go at one pace, everybody. We just go take it the pace you need, and drink lots of water because you're going to be dehydrated at high altitude. And sometimes that's what the hardest part is, because even it's steep sometimes, but it's just the altitude plus the steepness which makes it a little bit tough on some people, mostly coming from sea level. But your body starts adapting to that altitude. So if you arrive to Mexico City that it's already high a day earlier, it helps a lot just for your body to start adjusting. So, but just keep it at your own pace and enjoy the forest and the surrounding, and eventually you will get to see the wonderful monarchs, and it's doable. It's not, we'll get you there for sure.
Yeah, there's no race to the finish line, that's for sure. The forest itself is such an attraction. It's so beautiful.
So I do want to open up for questions sooner than later here, but I really think it's important that we touch on the horseback aspect of this trip. Having guided trips where that is an option, I know that there's often a lot of questions surrounding that, so I'd like to try to address those before they're even asked. Court, maybe take a second to walk me through the process, getting on the horses, what the ride is like, and just kind of, I'm actually personally afraid of horses. So if you can calm my nerves, I think you can calm basically anybody's nerves about getting on a horse.
Sure. Well, first you step on a very small catapult, and then no, I'm kidding. No, it's my first time ever horseback riding was on these little, mountain ponies in Mexico. And a lot of people's first time, or many, many years, is with these horses. They're super tame. They're smaller. They're not your big stallions. Each one of them has a caballero. It's a big family business. This is a huge source of income. We get to the conservation travel aspect of this, and they will guide your horse up with you. So you do not have to know how to horseback ride. All you got to do is just know how to sit in a saddle, look around, enjoy the sights and the sounds, and then they do all the work for you. There is a little stand you can kind of see here in the bottom left-hand corner, a couple of stairs where you can get there. You swing your leg over, someone will be there to help you, and it's pretty straightforward. But I will say a lot of people have that trepidation. A lot of people have a little bit of little anxiety, and I will say I do too. And it's each and every time it's great and it's wonderful.
And it looks beautiful. When we were going through this earlier, you guys kind of both agreed with me that this is really what to expect while you're on the horse as a view or a kind of setting just like this.
And I will say on the other side of the spectrum, we sometimes, I would say almost every trip we get one or two people that are real horseback riders, and they're like, can I take the reins? You absolutely can if you'd like to. But usually more of the concerns are not how fast can I go? It's how stable, how easy is this? You got to have a little, tighten your core a little bit, but that's about it. It's an easy introduction to horseback riding, that's for sure.
And of course, the ultimate goal is to get to something like this. So before we open for questions, just a little bit about the ethics of it all. How do we view them safely and appropriately? Are we are we in an area where we can? Yeah, I just I don't understand this scene. How do we get to this? How do we get to this point? And what do we do when we're there?
Asher, do you want to take this and I'll jump in?
It changes. Do you want me to jump in, Kurt?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it changes. As Kurt was saying, we go different places, different times of the day, and the monarchs are not always located, the colonies are not always located on the same trails. So every time, or at least some parts of the season, is like a surprise how it's going to be at the end when we get to be there. But basically, there's always a spot where you can see the trees with all the colonies. We call the colonies where the butterflies are concentrated on the trees. And as the day warms up, the butterflies start fluttering all over the place. So basically, you will horseback ride, then hike for a little bit, and then get to this wonderful magic place on the forest. And then we will have time just to relax. Sometimes some people like to sit down, some people want to go from one end to the other, back and forth, and take your pictures and look for a picture. Sometimes you just want to sit in peace and just observe what is around you. So it depends on how the butterflies, where are they in the sanctuaries, but we do have to follow the trails. And that's also for the conservation of the monarchs. So there's going to be a limit on the trail on how far we have to be from the butterflies. So there's a well-trained trail. There are some simple rules like no picking up the butterflies that are dead or alive. And an important, very simple rule is that we have to be as quiet as possible. And the reason is really it makes it a lot more enjoyable. This is the only place in the world where you can listen to the butterflies fluttering their wings. So the only way to enjoy that is if you are quiet. So it's really pretty simple. Just stay in the trail, follow a little bit the rules. This time you will have to wear our masks. That's the only kind of like extra thing, and that will make us be more quiet, so it will be more enjoyable.
And I want to touch on that. One other thing that they do prohibit is flash photography. So no need to bring a flash if you do have cameras with flashes or external flashes. The other quick thing, I may get some questions on this because I know we have some photographers out there, but people often ask, well, what kind of size lens do I need to bring? bring your normal wildlife lens. You know, you don't need to think, oh, well, I'm going to be, you know, right up in the butterflies, so I don't need to bring my normal wildlife lens. You will have more versatility if you have your normal lens, like your 70 to 300s, your 100 400s, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have that, don't worry. You're going to get some great photos. The butterflies are everywhere. Some of my favorite photos are of those that are closer. But yeah, you'd be surprised how much more flexibility you have with a little bit of telephoto. That would compared to like optical zoom, if you have a point and shoot, you know, something like 10 times zoom would be great.
Yeah, really, Corey, looking at your photos and some of the other guides who do this trip, that honestly, I see these photos, and that to me is the big draw. You know, I see these dense colonies, and it's stunning. I would be so fortunate to go on one of these trips. So as we open the floor for questions here, I'm just going to scroll through some of these images and just kind of some butterfly eye candy, so to speak. So unless you guys have anything else to add, Kendall, I think it's about time that we can get some questions rolling.
Great, thanks everyone. We have some good questions for you, and I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question for our panel today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. All right, a couple people have asked if they arrive a day or two early, will someone be at the airport to meet them?
Yes, definitely. We will pick you up if you arrive some days early or the same day of the trip. We take care of you since your number day one of your adventure, so nothing to worry about.
All right, fantastic. And someone is curious, when will they find out who their expedition leader is?
Well, usually at arrival, when you get to the hotel, you will find out, or sometimes at the welcome dinner, for sure.
And how many expedition leaders will there be per group?
Depending on the size of the group, but if it's a small group, there will be one expedition leader for up to 7 persons, and over 7 we will have 2 expedition leaders. Plus, remember, in these times we have a special operation staff that will be helping us with all the sanitizing.
All right, great. And just going back to gear related questions, I just wanted clarification that we do provide trekking poles on this trip, right? So people don't need to bring them?
Yes, we do provide trekking poles. If you have your own, usually, and they are retractable, usually you feel more comfortable using your own gear, but we do have plenty, so you don't need to go and buy them for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a couple questions related to money and what to bring. So first question is, what should we budget for the tips for truck drivers, buses, hotels, guides, etc.? And related to that, do the expedition leaders prefer to receive tips in pesos or US dollars?
Well, basically all the tips are included in the trip, so you don't have to worry about our local guides or drivers, porters, bellboys, all that is included. So really the only money you need to worry about is for either your alcoholic drinks, personal expenses, your beautiful souvenirs. And for the expedition leaders, either Mexican pesos or dollars doesn't make any difference. Whatever suits you and works for you works for expedition leaders as well.
Bitcoin?
No, we're not. We Mexicans are not much into Bitcoins. Let's leave it in Mexican pesos and US dollars.
Talking games.
Okay. So someone is wondering about dietary requirements. Looks like they may be gluten-free. Is that going to be any issue on the trip?
No, not at all. In Mexico, it's fairly easy because we eat lots of tortillas, and tortillas are gluten-free. So we are not much into bread. We're more into the tortillas. So a lot of the food we have is gluten-free. So we'll be able to feed you in a very healthy, good way. So nothing to worry for gluten-free diets
I'll
or
clarify
any
that.
other requirement. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to clarify and say that corn tortillas is the more authentic what you'll see down there. Flour tortillas is something that came about in Texas or something. I'm not really sure. So yes, corn tortillas, and they are gluten-free.
Okay, great. So how frequent are the bathrooms? How readily available are those?
Do you want to cover that, Kurt?
Sure. Yeah. Biological stops, the comfort stops, they're frequent. We get it. I mean, not only do we also have bladders, but we know that we're prompting you to drink as much water as you're comfortable doing, because at altitude, you do get dehydrated a little bit quicker. So I would say, just as a blanket statement, every hour and a half to 2 hours. 2 hours would be like a long, but like hour and a half more or less. That's what we're aiming for, especially on those car ride days where we are driving, say, from Mexico City to Angangeo or from Angangeo to Valle de Bravo. We know all the best restrooms with all the best snacks. So yeah, the convenience stores, we've got it mapped out.
Well, in Mexico, you have to pay for the restrooms, but that's also taken care by the expedition leader, so you don't need to worry about that either.
So someone is watching who said when they booked, they indicated they wanted to hike rather than ride the horses. How can that be handled?
Well, the first day when we visit the Monarchs in the afternoon, we really encourage everybody to use the horses, because we are a little bit in a hurry to get to the butterflies before it gets dark. And people are not really aware of the altitude, how long is the hike, how long it's going to take them. So definitely on our first visit to the Monarchs, we encourage everybody to take the horses. And then for the next days, you know what you're looking at, and how the trails are going to be, and how difficult or easy are going to be for you. And then you can talk with your expedition leaders, and the next days you can, if you feel you can do the hike, you are welcome to do it. We can find a way to arrange that, and it's no big deal. But definitely the first day, we do encourage everybody to get on the horses, just to make it for you to enjoy the butterflies for sure, and not miss the first day.
And I will add, so that's great advice. I will add that everybody hikes down from the colonies. We do not take the horses down in El Rosario, which is the first and third visit to the Monarchs. So it's just that one ride up the first time that we highly recommend. Otherwise, we do have, it's like a Ninja Warrior course that kind of gives you like a little bit of vetting to see if you're really cut out for the altitude. I'm kidding. But yeah, that first ride is the one that we're really trying to recommend. And then we, as a group, we're all walking down as the day ends.
Do travelers ever get motion sickness on the roads? Should they be prepared for that?
It's possible.
Yeah.
If you're susceptible to it, it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, we do get into the mountains. If you know you're like a really motion sick person, you may want to have some Dramamine with you, or take it prophylactically. You know, it's a 4-hour drive from Mexico City to Angangeo, and like the first hour and a half is all through Mexico City. So it's not windy, it's not fast or anything. But then, you know, the last, I don't know, Astrid, what would you say? The last hour, we're kind of getting into the hills a little bit, and you may want to have something on hand. But I would say in general, it's only ever been people that know they're going to be susceptible that have any sort of issues, and with the proper care, they don't have issues.
Great. Okay, so it is the top of the hour. I'm going to take one last question today. Should there be any concerns about personal security while in Mexico City?
Well, not just like in any other big city. Just if you stay in the tourist area, you'll be very safe. Don't go at night to, I don't know, any of these places you are not sure where you're going. And when you're going out in the streets, what we recommend is not to bring out all like your jewelry or very fancy stuff, because you don't know the people, you don't know where you're going. But in general, if you keep like a low profile, you should, and stay in the area around the hotel, you'll be very safe. The only thing we definitely don't recommend is to go to the ATM machines at night or when it's dark. There are ATMs inside the the hotel, so just avoid all that money stuff. But in general, it's very safe. They have a tourist police around all that Polanco area. But with all the COVID, things are going to be, there's going to be less people around. So probably you have to be a little bit more aware because there's almost few people in the streets.
Okay, great.
And don't bring your passport and valuables every time you get out of the hotel. Leave it at the hotel. It's more safe than carrying it around all over the place. And sometimes it's not necessarily that it gets stolen. You can lose it, and then it's a nightmare. So it's safer definitely to leave things at the hotel than to lose it carrying around.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to call it there. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to present for us today. This was just fabulous. I know you answered pretty much every single question that was asked. But if we didn't get to your question, or if something else comes up for everyone who's watching, do consult your pre-departure briefing or give us a call and talk to your adventure specialist, and we're more than happy to help you. Corbin, I'm going to turn it back over to you for any closing comments.
Yeah, just once again, just thank you. I hope we've instilled some excitement for those of you that are traveling coming up pretty soon here, it sounds like. And thanks to the three of you for being here with me today and running through some of this stuff. And Kendall, as well as always, thanks for facilitating and hosting. And Court, Astrid, Renata, if any of you have anything to add here at the end, feel free.
I hope you guys are excited for the adventure of a lifetime.
Absolutely have an amazing time.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to meet some of you in one of these trips. I'll see you soon, some of you, and if not, enjoy the trip. It's going to be amazing.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. We did record today's presentation, so we'll have the replay sent out to you soon. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.